What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, I wanted to talk about the Memphis Grizzlies, and this is a team that I do not talk about very often. That's kind of a theme for the week, honestly. I've talked about the Blazers and the Indiana Pacers and the Wizards over the past couple of days. Now it's the Grizzlies' turn, because we're kind of just going through a lot of these teams that are on the bubble of the playoffs at the moment, that are looking like they're going to be play-in teams, and kind of looking at their schedule for the rest of the year, seeing how things are shaking up, and where they're going to stack up when everything is said and done. So I wanted to talk about Memphis here, kind of how their season has gone and what looks like it's going to be next for them. So the Grizzlies are an interesting team because they are one that does not get a lot of national coverage at all. Like, people don't talk about them. They're one of the smallest markets in the league. I have only made probably 2 or 3 videos on the Grizzlies in the lifetime of this channel. And they're just solid. They have been. They're very similar to what they were last year, since they've had Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson and all these guys here. They're just okay. They're a bubble playoff team in the Western Conference. Nothing special, but they have a lot of young talent, and they got a lot of guys who are going to be really, really good in a couple of years. They have a really bright future. They've drafted well. They're well coached. They have a smart front office, and so this is just an overall solid team. Honestly, kind of the Western Conference equivalent of the Pacers. Now that I'm thinking about it, making those same comparisons. A team that's drafted well and is well run in the offseason and stuff. But I think that the thing that sets this team apart from maybe the Pacers is I feel like they have a little bit more of an upside for the future. They got a lot of young talent, like I said, on this team. And so even though they're good right now, they have the potential to be even better than they are right now in a couple of years. So that's just, you got to give credit to the franchise and to the organization for identifying talent and doing well drafting. Because not only Ja Morant, he was kind of the no-brainer pick at number 2, but getting Jaren Jackson Jr. the year before that, and then you have guys like Desmond Bane and Xavier Tillman and Brandon Clark, who were all kind of found later on in the draft, and they've all ended up working out. They found some really, really nice players in the mid-late first round, even second round picks have turned out to be really, really good for this Grizzlies team. So that's the benefit for them, is they've drafted really well, and it's paying dividends for them because they have a lot of guys in their rotation that are homegrown, and that's just a good thing. So let's take a look at the rest of the year for the Grizzlies here. The schedule looks not too tough, about average probably. Next 3 games are tougher. I talked about this in the Blazers video yesterday, but these two teams are right next to each other in terms of the playoff race, and they are just a couple of games back of the Trailblazers at the moment. So they have these 2 games here against the Blazers. One of them happens tomorrow, I guess today as you're seeing this when this is uploaded, Sunday. So they're playing the Blazers in Portland. They have a game against the Nuggets, who are also tough. That's on a back-to-back on the road. That's a tough game. And then they go home to play the Blazers again. So that's going to be big. They did get the first win over Portland the other night. They won by 2 points, a very, very close game late there, and ended up getting the win. So as long as they can win 1 out of these next 2, not only do they inch closer to the Blazers in the standings, but they grab the tiebreaker. So they just need 1 out of these 2 games against the Blazers, and they're looking in pretty good position to end up passing them down the line, especially given how tough Portland's schedule is looking like. And with Memphis' schedule is not super easy, but there's not a ton of tough games here. So the next 3 are pretty tough for them, but then it does lighten up a little bit. You got 2 games against the Orlando Magic back-to-back. That should be, not too tough there. The Magic are one of the worst teams in the league. The New York Knicks are streaking right now. Who knows where they're going to be? That's in about a week or so, maybe, a week and a half-ish. And the Knicks are a good team, obviously, but, they're not unbeatable. The Grizzlies just went to overtime against them recently. You have a game at the Timberwolves and the Pistons and the Raptors. All 3 of those teams are not super great, specifically Minnesota and Detroit, who are tanking right now. The Raptors, who knows where they'll be. They still have a shot to get into the play-in game. They might just pack it up. I've kind of said that over the last couple of weeks, that I feel like the Raptors are going to tank for the rest of the year, but they've actually won like 4 or 5 in a row, so maybe I'm wrong. New Orleans Pelicans are another team in that playoff race in the Western Conference. That could be a tough game there. Dallas Mavericks, same thing. There's still a possibility that the Grizzlies end up passing Dallas. Now, the Mavericks did just have a big win tonight over the Lakers to move themselves up even further. They could potentially get up as high as the 5th seed. We'll have to see how the rest of the season goes for them. And then you got 2 games against the Kings, and that's right at the end of the season, so they'll probably be tanking by then. That's a good benefit there. Feels like the Kings are probably going to be, trying to lose, if they're not already, definitely by the last 3 games of the season. Feels like they're going to be trying to lose as much as possible. And the last game of the season is the Golden State Warriors, and that could be a very, very huge game. Whoever made the schedule knew what they were doing, because these 2 teams are right next to each other in the standings. I believe the Warriors are just 1 game back of the Grizzlies right now. and the season series is tied 1-1. They played a couple of weeks ago. Those 2 games, Steph Curry was out, and it was a split 1-1. The Warriors took the first game. Grizzlies came back and won the second night. And like I said, those were both without Steph Curry. So this last game of the season against Golden State could potentially be, deciding who gets what seed, whether that's 7 or 8, or whether that's 8 or 9, or whatever it ends up being. We could very well see a seeding come down to the very last day of the season between these 2 teams. So that should be a very, very exciting game. It might not, it probably won't be for whoever has to miss out on the play-in game. It's not going to be like 10 versus 11 type of thing like we saw with the Nuggets and the Timberwolves a couple of years ago. But it could have a similar feel to that, where this is a very important game in terms of seeding purposes, who gets home court advantage in the play-in game, who has to only win 1 game rather than having to win 2 if it's 8 versus 9. So that could be a very, very big game on the last day of the season, because not only is it, 2 teams that are right next to each other, but it does decide the tiebreaker between the 2. So that's a big game. So here's the current standings in the Western Conference. Kind of talked about this yesterday. They were very similar. A couple games happened tonight, changed some things up. But the Mavericks are a game up on the Blazers for the 6th seed. Grizzlies are at 13 games back of first, which puts them at 1.5 back of Portland for that 7th seed, and 2.5 back of the Dallas Mavericks for that 6th seed. So they're right in there. They could potentially move up even higher. And like I said yesterday, the Blazers have a tough schedule, so they could end up slipping for sure. But we'll have to see how that goes, right? And the Spurs also have a very tough schedule. They're just a half game back of the Grizzlies right now. A lot of people have expected the Spurs to fall. And the schedule starts to get really tough now for them. I think they have like one more easier game coming up, and maybe we'll talk about them soon as well. But they have kind of been treading water a little bit, but it starts to really get tough. I mean, almost every game left on the Spurs schedule is against a playoff team. So we could very well see them start to slip down a little bit. And then the Golden State Warriors are just 1 game back of the Grizzlies as well. And like I mentioned, that final game of the season is between these 2 teams. So I have a feeling that it might come down to that in terms of seeding. So the Warriors also have a relatively easier schedule for the rest of the way. So potentially they could also end up moving up as well. So the Grizzlies are in a good spot. Like I said, I don't anticipate them falling out of the play-in tournament. They will at least be in the top 10 in the West. I think if any of these teams is going to fall out, it's probably going to be the Spurs, considering how tough their schedule is. And even then, though, they just beat the Pelicans tonight, and the Pelicans have been super up and down. They're 4 games back of the 10th seed right now, 4.5 back of the Spurs if they were going to be the team that falls. So the 10 teams might be the ones that are in right now. Who knows how things are going to go as the season chugs along. But the Grizzlies, I feel like, are going to be at the very least in this mix here. Just comes down to now, getting that home court advantage in the play-in game, or getting that 7 or the 8 spot so that they don't have to play a second game. They don't have to win 2 games in order to make it in. They might have to play a second game if they end up losing that 7-8 matchup. But we will have to see how things go for them. But they're in a good spot. They're a very good team. And coming down the stretch, the schedule's not too tough, so we'll have to see how they fare. And I just want to mention that they now have Jaren Jackson Jr. back in the lineup, and that's huge because they went most of the season without him. I believe he's been back for 2 games now, back in the lineup for them, and they went all season without him, and people have kind of forgotten just how good this guy is, just because he hasn't played for a while, hasn't played since the bubble with the meniscus thing. Took him a while to get back, but now he's back in the lineup there, and I was lucky enough to see him in his summer league game. I watched him in person during the Jazz have this little summer league with like 4 teams, kind of happens before the Vegas one, and I go every year. It didn't happen last year for obvious reasons, but I've been pretty much every year that it's happened for the past 5 or 6 seasons, and I watched him there. And he hit a half-court buzzer beater in his first summer league game, and I was sitting in the lower bowl and I watched him do it. And from that time, I was like, this kid is good, dude. This kid is he hit that buzzer beater from half court at the end of the first half or something. And he can legit shoot it, and he is 7 feet tall. He has grown since he's been out. You can tell when you watch him play. Shout out to Kenny. I think Kenny tweeted that out, KOT4Q. Everybody loves Kenny, right? And he just tweeted out that Jaren Jackson Jr. definitely got taller, and I listened to the mismatch with Chris Vernon, who covers the Grizzlies, and he has sources that say that Jaren Jackson has gotten, he's grown an inch or 2 since he's last taken the court. You can tell when he's out there. He has definitely grown a little bit. So this guy is a legit 7 feet. If he's not exactly measured at 7 feet, he's close. and he can hit threes, and he's good defensively, and he knows what to do, and he's a smart player. This guy is very valuable to the Grizzlies' success, and they've been able to stay around 500 without him all year, and now that he's back for their stretch run, I think that makes them a little scarier. So that's just one thing to keep an eye on, is getting him integrated back into the lineup with all these new players they have, getting him back up to speed, shaking off that rust there. But Jaren Jackson Jr. is a good player, and it adds another dimension to the Grizzlies when he's healthy. And Ja Morant has gotten better. He's been playing really, really well recently. He's had a couple of really big games, putting his name in the history books. I've seen a couple of things on Twitter with, he's the first player with this specific stat line since, 2007 or whatever it is, right? That's not exactly true, but you know what I mean, right? So Ja Morant has had some really big games, some good assist numbers, some good rebound numbers, good point totals. For a young player, he is certainly special, and I loved him coming out of the draft. I think that he has gotten a lot better in his second season. So shout out to Ja Morant as well. And like I mentioned at the top of the video, they have a lot of young guys that they just find in the draft. Brandon Clark, Xavier Tillman, Desmond Bane. You can go down the list. Like, they have a lot of guys who just are diamonds in the rough, and they just show up and play hard. So the Grizzlies have they have a good culture, and I think they're going to be right back in, they already are in the playoff race, but I think they're only going to get better because they draft well, they make good, smart moves in the offseason, and this is just an overall solid team. So I think that's about all I have to say on the Memphis Grizzlies. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Grizzlies and how the rest of their season is going to go. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.